Thank you, Brian. I think you've introduced me every year I've been up here, so I'm glad to keep the streak alive.
Let's keep it going.
All right. Well, thank you, folks. It's an honor to be back up here on the main stage at Bay Pres this year, and I'm here today to speak to you on the power of community. And I want to begin today by telling you a story, and it's a true story that happened to me, and it's called A Tale of Two Parking Lots. It's a tale of two parking lots, which actually do involve two parking lots. And the first part of this story happened about 10 years ago, in the summer of 2012. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot outside of the church we attended at the time. It was a Friday evening, and I was there for a men's group that would always meet on Fridays. I was there early, so I decided to sit in my car and make a couple of phone calls. I made one phone call to my best friend from high school, and the other to my roommate from college, both who I maintained good relationships with and both who were married but with no kids yet. And I was calling them because at that time, up until that point in my life, I was currently going through the most challenging season of my life. I was experiencing stress in my marriage, was really kind of hanging on by a thread. We were challenged with our son, Christopher, with his disability and finding the right resources for him, finding the right school placement and therapy placements. I'd lost a job earlier in the year, and our finances were also kind of spinning out of control. Essentially, everything was falling apart at once. So I did what anyone would naturally do. I called my friends to say, hey, this is what's going on, can you help? And the two of them, as much as they cared about me, they listened, and they basically said to me, you know, we care about you, we get this is hard, but we've got nothing for you. It was just so out of context for them that they really had no advice. In fact, my best friend from high school said, you know, this is so crazy to me that if I were you, I would just walk. To which I said, I don't think I can do that. But he said, nonetheless, I care about you and please let me know how you're doing. A few minutes later, I go into the church to the men's group, and I met with the men in there who, quite honestly, on average, were probably about 20 years older than me, so I was expecting to get some really good sage advice from them. And as I unfolded and unpacked the very same story I just told my two friends, I waited for their response. And after 30 seconds or a minute of uncomfortable silence, the group leader chimed in and said, boy, that's pretty tough. I'm sorry to hear that. But what you need to know is that it's going to be okay. Now, if you've ever been in true crisis, you know that's probably the worst advice you can give to someone. Because as well-intentioned as he might have been, and at the same time, in a grander spiritual sense, we all know that eventually it is all going to be okay. That's not what I needed in that moment. I needed real help, I needed real support, and it was then that I realized I did not have a community. I had family and friends that might have cared but didn't get it. I needed a community. But then, of course, I had to ask the questions, and being a teacher for years, I started with my W questions. I said, okay, well, what's a community anyway? What does it look like, at least for me? Where do I find it? Who do I even connect with? And how do I even start any of that? I really was lost, and I needed to get some answers to a lot of deep questions. So, to describe my journey through community, I'm going to use this visual or this analogy of a tree, which I think is easy enough for all of us to understand. It's the idea that you plant a seed, the seed takes root, you then grow your foundation through your stem and your trunk, and eventually you branch out, and as those branches take shape, you get your leaves and your fruit manifest. So for me, planting a seed actually started out with, believe it or not, finding a new church. Now, I don't want to minimize how difficult it is for a family of disability to find a church home. It has certainly been difficult for us over the years, but we were blessed in that the next church that we found, from the one I just described, was actually very loving and accepting of us. Even though they didn't have a stated disability ministry, they supported us, they loved us, and they fed into us. And so we benefited from that. And like any family in our situation, we really took a long time to just be fed and loved, and that was great. And so it was a very natural experience of community, showing up on a Sunday, having somewhere to worship, and having somewhere for our son to go as well with Sunday school. Being involved in the events of the church throughout the calendar year and holiday events and all that kind of thing. But then after a few years, I decided that we needed more. We needed more community. We needed to go deeper. And the thing about community is that it's not just what you get or receive from someone. It's also about what you can also give to someone as well. And as challenging as our families usually are in a lot of these situations where we don't normally think that we have anything to give, the reality is that even in small ways, we do want to show appreciation for the ones who have given to us so generously. So I started out by exploring how to get deeper in our own church. And so we looked at, again, very simple things in the beginning, like joining a life group, which easy enough was a way for us to go deeper with some relationships in the church. But interestingly enough, through the experience with that life group, we also developed skills and tools and experience that allowed us to bless other folks further in the future, such as when we went to another church and we started our own life group just for special needs families. Our tools, the tools we gained and the experience we gained from that previous experience allowed us to do something and bless other families like ours in a very special and unique way. But then I got even deeper still in that church community within those walls. Got involved with men's ministry, got involved with service projects, got involved with leadership campaigns as far as different fundraising in the church and that type of thing. Not only did they provide relationships for me, but they provided me with good experience, skills, tools, and training that I could then take, again, outside of the church walls later and apply to building and developing community with special needs families in other ways. And then after a few years, we eventually left that church, and again, we found another church. But about that same time, I also started to branch out, literally. And I started to find ways to build community in the disability world, again, outside of those church walls. And what I started out with, actually, again, were very, very small intentional things. I kept it easy, I kept it simple, and I kept it relatively close to home. And I looked at things such as engaging social media, which we all know and love. And sometimes it's as simple as what I did, which was I found a Facebook group for special needs dads in the Chicago area. Through that group, I found out that they did an in-person meetup. And although that in-person meetup they did was too far for me to attend because it was about an hour from where we lived, I did meet a guy in that group who said, hey, I would love to start something like that where we live. Who's interested? And of course, I jumped at the chance. What's interesting about that simple yes that I gave to that dad was not only were we able to start a group by us that met in person and that still meets to this day even after all these years, but it's the relationships that we made when we formed that group. We found a restaurant in the community that would host us, and they still give us a free party room to this day where we can do our meetings. There are relationships with guys I have made over the years that I still have. And in fact, the dad that I started that group with, I still maintain a very close and interesting relationship with up until this point. And again, what was interesting too is that even though we took a pause during COVID, we still remained online, of course, and not too many guys showed up because I think we were all burned out on Zoom by that point. But when we came back live in 2022, not only did we start to get new guys almost every month, but we started to get a record number of guys show up. So again, I make the point here, as I do in the slide, is that, you know, technology is great, virtual is great, especially if you're meeting with folks from different states or different parts of the country, but where possible, engage in person, because it really does have the max value for you. And after doing things like that, I started to dig even further in terms of expanding. And the last point in this slide is to use your gifts and talents and embrace your passion. So many times we find community with folks that have things in common with us. And obviously, folks who are special needs parents, special needs families, that's a pretty easy one. But in my case, I started to feel the urge to be creative and start to do some writing. And what's interesting is that there was a mom that I had met actually through the organization I now work for, that I knew through some of the family retreats that we do, and she was a blogger for a small Christian ministry up in Wisconsin, and she said, you know, we're always looking for more writers. Why don't you give it a try? And I'd been looking to do some writing, but I said to myself, I don't know if I want to be a blogger. I don't know if I'm going to be good at doing that. I don't know if I'm going to like it. But I tried it, and I found out I was okay at it, and that it was something that I wanted to keep doing. About 6 months later, that small, teeny little church ministry up in Wisconsin merged with something that I had equally never heard of called Key Ministry. And then, of course, I became a writer for Key Ministry, and I've been coming to this conference, and I have been doing blogging and speaking at other ministry conferences and podcasts and all of these things. But the thing about that, again, is that I don't share that to just talk about how cool I am. It's really to emphasize that I embraced a passion to serve a community that was exactly like mine, families that exactly were going through what I had been through. And it was a way for not only me to give back, but also to engage in community in the big C sense, outside of the walls of a church or a building, with folks that maybe lived in other states or in other parts of the country entirely. And so that was really the value of me branching out. Was I took a chance with some relationships, I took a chance with some of the things I had learned, again, in some good environments, in some good church environments, and then applied that into creating community on a bigger scale. But the best thing about community and the best thing about what happens when you grow the tree and you grow the tree well is the fruit that manifests. Now, what's great about the fruit is that the fruit really speaks to the friendships you make. And in this big C sense of community, there are folks that I have really gone deep with in terms of building and developing authentic and real friendships. These are a few pictures of the, hold on, we'll get there. These are a few pictures of the conference here last year, in fact. And what's cool about these pictures is that, again, the folks that I met through doing this ministry work, and not just through Key Ministry, but other ministries around the country that do like-minded work, are that these are folks who, over these last few years, as we've gone through a pandemic, and I personally have gone through an equally challenging season of life over these last couple of years, these are folks that have honestly reached out to me. They've been there for me through phone calls, texts, emails, messages. One person, in fact, that's here this weekend actually did some therapy sessions with me. I was supported in so many unique and special ways, and these are just a few pictures of friends, and I don't have time to go into a deep dive about all of them now, and there are many others, and if you're not on here, please don't feel bad. But the fact is that these are people that I legitimately love and care for, and likewise have spoken into my life when I really needed them as well. I mentioned my friend who I started the Dads group with. Well, this picture is of my son, Chris, on the left, and his son Levi on the right. This picture was taken a couple of years ago at a pumpkin fest they do in the fall, right in the town that I live in. The relationship that I developed with that random dad in a Facebook group that I didn't really think anything of at the time, not only manifested itself into an in-person meetup where we developed a friendship and developed friendship with other guys, but then our friendship extended beyond that group. And so we became not only close friends, but so did our kids. And when his son said, hey, we're going to this thing, oh, we've got to invite them. That is the true essence of community right there, is when you can have those intentional relationships. And relationships that not just have value for you, but your kids. So that my son can actually have a sense of that, knowing that, you know, his dad's friends are also his friends, and so are his dad's friends' kids. And of course, one organization that I always love to tout at these things is Special Fathers Network, an organization that is dedicated just to special needs dads, based in Chicago, but has a national reach. I have connected with dads from all over the country through this group. And what's really cool about this is that we do a couple of virtual dad meetup groups with guys from all over the country a couple of times a week. And this was something we did in St. Louis just back in this last November, where we met in St. Louis for a retreat. All of these dads getting together, all of these guys from all over the country, meeting together, guys who, again, would see each other every week, but during the week we text each other, email each other, pray for each other, all of these things. It's great, again, when you can have that real world in-person connection and, again, just be together and do life in a way that's special for you based on the experiences that you've all kind of shared and had. I mentioned with my story originally that the parking lot story actually had two parts to it, and so I just want to share with you that second part now. I equally found myself sitting in my car in a parking lot in November of 2019. And it was Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and I was sitting in a parking lot outside of a little shopping area not far from where I lived. And I wasn't going out to get the best deals, but I was sitting in my car because I just needed to get out of the house. Because not even 15 or 20 minutes before that, I had just got handed divorce papers out of the blue. What was different about me sitting in that car that time? It was that, unlike the first time I sat in that car and made those phone calls, now not only did I have a lot more people to call, but I had people that I had intentionally developed great community and friendship with. I had dads who were walking the same road that I was. Single dads, special needs dads. Some folks who were attorneys, which would have been handy at that time. Some folks who were therapists or had that background. Some folks with a pastoral background. Some folks who were just friends of mine. But whatever their backgrounds were, I now had a community with a big C that I could lean into when I needed them. And so I encourage you, when you think about community, community does not have to be confined to the walls of a church or a building. Likewise, it doesn't have to be the people that are right next door to you. It can be people in the next state over or around the country. But I encourage you as much as possible, build that community, build those resources, build that firm foundation so that your tree can grow and your fruit can manifest, because those relationships will be so sweet to you when you very, very much need them. And of course, I leave you again with a picture of my son and some wonderful self-promotion. Please take a screenshot. Thank you very much.